Okay, it's time to talk couplers and plugs that will go on the end of a air hose or the inlet of an air tool. And this can get confusing. This should be simple, but this can get confusing. So let's talk about this for a minute. And when I say minute, I probably mean 25 minutes, but we'll see how it goes. So it's been, 2 years ago now that I found Prevost. I actually walked right by it and stopped in and checked out some of their stuff. And then I'd met Kevin Brown, and later on in that 2016 SEMA, and he said, "Man, you got to check out this Prevost stuff." I was talking about air compressors, and I said, "Yeah, I was in that booth," and so we went over there, and I met Garrett from Prevost, who's the West Coast representative, and then they eventually introduced me to the Mark, who runs U.S. operations, and then Brad, who runs the Southeast. And I started begging them to let me sell the product, and eventually they gave in to my craziness, and we've started to build out, or I've started to build out my own setup, test it, vet it. So I've been using it for a while, and now I feel comfortable understanding the product line enough to start getting it out to you. And so we're going to start with hoses, hose reel. The hose reel will come from Cox, and then plugs and couplers. So this video I'm talking to you a little bit about the plugs and couplers and how they work. So we have a couple of different options. You have what is the most amazing thing on the planet is a fluid swiveling coupler. Talk about that a little bit more here in a second. And then we have two different versions of the standard coupler. These still are same idea, same basic principle as the other. They will swivel because the air or the plug will swivel a bit. But these are the standard couplers. They're the same thing. They just come in a 3/8 inch inlet or a 1/4 inch, and these are the NPT versions for us here in the US. NPT stands for National Pipe Thread, which is a diminishing type thread that as you torque it down, the threads bite and grip and then hopefully seal. You should use Teflon tape with these type of connections. So here's how this works. There are, I should have gone and looked it up, but there are, I think it's 7, maybe 8 standards worldwide. There's the industrial standard, which is ISO 06, which for whatever reason has been adopted on the east coast of the US. There's TrueFlate, which is usually denoted as red. Your couplers or your buttons are normally red. The industrial is normally blue. So the red type of standard connection is on the West Coast, and then you have a Japanese standard, and you have a few different European standards, and so you have all these different standard type of fittings. And I think where that comes from, I might be making this up, but I think where that comes from is over the years, one company would patent a technology or patent a fitting, and another company would overcome that patent, would patent a different type of fitting, and so we ended up with all different types of plugs or connections or connection types. And me having a clean slate in my garage, and combined with the fact that these plugs are like $1 a piece, $1.50 to $2 a piece. It's not a big deal to change or adopt a standard, even if you weren't starting from scratch. So I looked at all the different fitting types, and it made the most sense to me to adopt the Euro standard. It's called the European high flow standard. And the reason it's high flow is the hole is bigger. And so in my world, having a bigger hole here will allow more air to flow, which would theoretically you'd have less parasitic loss in your airlines or in your system. So to me, it just makes sense that, well, if we're going to adopt it from scratch, why wouldn't we just adopt the European standard? And if these are inexpensive enough and readily available enough, I'm going to stock them in the thousands. Then whenever you buy an air tool from me or you buy a coupler from me, you can just buy a 10-pack or a 25-pack or buy a bunch of these, and that way you can swap them out in your tools and have a new fresh Teflon taped connection. Okay, so These will be denoted by green. The other thing that gets me excited is the hose that I like so much, which is called the Stowflex hose. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The Stowflex hose is green, so the green matches the green and everything just looks cool, right? It matches nicely. So that's a byproduct or a side advantage to having these fittings be this tight. The real advantage to these, I think I can unequivocally say these are the best couplers in the world. I haven't found anything else as good. Swagelock, there's some other stainless companies that have some good fittings. I don't know how much they support air as they do water and oil delivery and things like that. But these fittings for air, the operation is the smoothest. It's the best connectivity. They are a little bit heavier than your standard connection or your standard coupler, but the claim to fame on these is that they're a double release or an easy release. I guess you could say. I'll show you. I'll fire up the little crappy air compressor here and show you how this works. Actually, you know what I'll do? I'll go over to HQ and show you the operation of how these things work under the Jenny compressor for this video. So we have a coupler, we have a plug. It connects like so, nice and smooth, nice and easy. Under air, it goes in just the same. But the beauty of these type of connections is that when you press the button, these are called the Prevost S1 couplers. When you press the button, it blows off the air. It blows it off so it's not loud, and a typical coupler tends to pop or hiss, or you have to release. The air has to go somewhere. So these bleed off the air really, really smoothly. Again, I'll show you that operation. But if you were to do this, if you could do this on a traditional coupler, this thing under air would shoot like a bullet across the room and darn near take somebody's head off. Whereas the Prevost S1 couplers, they're a double release. So I press the button, it releases the air, and then I can release the button or release the plug. Whereas a traditional style or traditional version, I'm going to push it in, hold, release, let the air kind of blow off, and then I got to keep my hands on it. Again, it's not the end of the world to have to do that, but if we have this, why wouldn't we use this? Would be my recommendation. So again, the couplers, and I'm going to stock these, they come in some other different versions, but I can get anything you want. But the ones I'm going to stock are the traditional threaded connections. They have barb fittings. They also have, I forget what the other type of fitting is called. It's a plug type fitting where you would use an ear clamp to clamp it down and then do some sort of rubber grommet or cover to hide the hose that's been cut. But the threaded fittings are just more common, easier, to get a hose and to connect it without having to have special tools for it. So these are the ones I'm going to stock. And I'll stock both sizes, the 1/4 inch, the 3/8. Now, just because the inlets are different sizes, the outlet where the plug goes is universal, right? So this is a 1/4 inch, what we would call male plug. I also have 1/4 inch female plug, depending on what you're going to put these on. Most air tools are going to need a male. Most hoses are going to need a female. If you wanted to have a loose hose with a fitting on the end, if it has a 1/4 inch connection on the hose, you would go with the female option. Both fit. And then we also have the 3/8 option. So 3/8 female, 3/8 male. These are going to be less common, but if you have some big heavy-duty air tools, they may have a 3/8 inch input. And so, just depends. So I have all of these. But whether it's 3/8 or 1/4 inch, these are all universal. They all fit into these same S1 fittings. So there's only one, it's just confusing to me, there's only one type of coupler that you would need for both 3/8 and 1/4 inch applications, right? So there's only one option. And there are also different types of plugs. I'm offering the traditional NPT threaded version. There are barb fitting and other types as well. Again, I can get anything in the Prevost catalog within a few days, as long as they have it here in the U.S. So not a big deal to get our hands on these different types of fittings. And then, of course, I've talked about this for a long time. If you watch any of my videos, We have, again, same S1 fitting. These are rather expensive, but this is a fluid swiveling coupler. And one of the rubs I had, and one of the reasons why I think I can provide some value to the world with this stuff is in the Prevost catalog, there are no pictures or videos or any discussion of this online. I kind of shrugged off the idea even using this thing. It's kind of hard to put on if you don't have the hose hooked up. But there's a photo of it that looks like this at a 90-degree angle. I'm like, well, what the heck? How the heck does that work? You know, so picture a photo from like this distance in the catalog, and you're like, well, how am I supposed to use that? What you don't see is this complete swiveling fluidness, amazingness. It has an aluminum body. The only thing that's a little funky that you may want to put a dab of super glue or something on this once you get the protector here, or the cover in place. You may want to glue it because it can tend to slide a little bit. But imagine this, then this is a $97 piece of awesomeness. But me showing you how this works gives you the opportunity to really see what it's about, rather than having to take a flyer on a $97 piece of equipment that you may or may not appreciate. So at least I'm able to show you how this thing works. And these accept it's the same exact type of connection where we have a fitting on the end. So let me pull out, I've got my nice wound up hoses here. Let me pull out a hose that I have set up. Let me wipe the sweat off me. It's 100 degrees out here. And let's talk a little bit about how you would set this. So let's do a quick install here on our green Stowflex hose. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the hose differences here while we're at it. We have two different hose types. Right, we have what's called an Erica hose. So this is Prevost Erica. I believe these are Goodyear hoses. I'm not sure. They're branded Prevost, but they are both a rubber form. So this is the Erica is a traditional rubber hose, and these go for what, $70, right? So this is a 50-foot, $70 hose versus a paint grade. And to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure what the material is. I'm gonna have to do do some probing, do some asking about what this hose is made out of. But it's a really interesting material. This is called a Prevost Stowflex. And one of the problems with most hoses, they send them with either 1/4-inch fittings on each side or 3/8-inch fittings on each side. And for most hose reels are going to accept a 3/8-inch fitting or 3/8-inch NPT, threaded fitting. And then most fittings, most couplers are going to be 1/4-inch, especially our swiveling coupler, which we're going to put on this hose here right now. So the disadvantage to buying a hose with two different size fittings is that, with the same size fittings, then you'd have to do some sort of reducer or on one of the two ends. So what I did is I went to Prevost and said, hey, let's make an OG specific version of the hose with a 1/4-inch on one end and a 3/8 on the other. So now we have it. Now the Stowflex hose ends up being $135. I think it looks cool. That's one advantage. But the main thing, I just like the material. It's a little hard to explain. It's like whereas the rubber is softer, it's grippier. It's like a little bit, there's a little scale to it, like a little slime to it almost feel. That's a bad example because doesn't leave anything on your hands. But you just have to have one in your possession to see it. It's hard to explain. I just think it's a great option. It's a great hose type, and so I decided to carry it. I like the material, and then the nice advantage is the green matches. Metric, yeah. So this is a 21 millimeter, 9/16. So one little trick, if you're not super handy and if you buy one of these, I don't send these assembled, mainly just out of time. But one little trick is you can lay your one wrench on the table and then take the other and push against. make sure you put your rubber jacket cover, the rubber thinger, on first. Otherwise you're going to be pulling this off again. You know, with NPT fittings, I always tape them, and then you generally want to torque them pretty well. Then we'll pull our jacket up here, put it in place. And then this is where, you know, over time, if you bump this and you're pulling on this, it might make sense to take this and put a little dab of super glue. I don't know, I haven't tried that yet to see how that does to hold this in place, but look at that, look at how awesome that is. Okay, so on the other end of the hose, so I need to put a 3/8 inch female on here so that I can connect it to my little Ingersoll Rand compressor over there. And we'll show you basic operation. I keep the little compressor here, you know, if I had a flat or you needed a, I'm always, you know, checking the pressures on my tires, making sure they're appropriate. So this is a larger size then. Interesting, this is a 18 millimeter here, and then this fitting is a 13/16. Considering it's French, that's odd. So most of the time, you're going to be buying these hoses and using it on a hose reel. But you do have the option to do this. Eventually I'm going to come up also with a clean looking solution, you know, a jacket to cover this up as well. I've got my Ingersoll Rand, my little compressor here. I've taken and I've put a 1/4 inch male connection on my PCL tire gauge. All right, so I've got this aired up, and I've actually taken and put, these are the 3/8 coupler, the 3/8 version of these, and have put these in place on the actual on the inlet to my little Ingersoll Rand compressor. And then I'm gonna fill up the line. All right, and then I have the ability to, with my swiveling coupler, notice how awesome that is. Take my swiveling coupler and I install and put it in place. Oops. Push it on. So now the beauty of the Prevost is when I want to release, I push, let go, pressure's released, and then my device is then removed. So that's the big advantage to an S1 coupler. So you can see the quick release by just the push of a button on how it works. Super clean, seamless. And then of course, you know, for this tool, not as big of an advantage, but I have the ability to completely and fluidly swivel this in all directions. It becomes really advantageous when you're dealing with a polisher. So that's our Stowflex hose and our Prevost S1 connections. I hope it makes sense for your air compressor system. These are really hard to find, and I'm hoping to be able to provide them to you. So there you have it. Prevost S1 couplers, Prevost Stowflex hose, Prevost Airca hose, all in stock, all live in the store. Today is September 18th, 2018. And so I have these available. You really can't find these anywhere else. They're really hard to find. There really aren't any online dealers. I suspect as I start promoting or talking about this, that you'll probably start to see more pop up. One thing I will mention, I didn't realize this. I thought they swiveled, but I got a little tongue-tied there in the camera. Once you get these on a hose, these do, even the non-fluid couplers, both the 1/4 and the 3/8, they both swivel as well as swivel through the plug. So they are pretty pliable. But that's those are the products live in the store. Again, I'm not quoting prices as much on here. I mean, these are 97. I think these are 30 something bucks a piece. So these are very somewhere between $1 and $4, $5 a piece. $135 hose, $70 hose. They're, those prices are subject to whatever, whatever the pricing is the time that you're watching this video, because sometimes these videos stay up for a long time, or these videos live in infamy. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting me on these crazy products, affording me the ability to find this stuff and then provide it to you and share with you what's going on. Stay tuned. Also make sure to check out the Cox hose reel video. I'll be sharing that one here shortly as well. So if you haven't seen that, check that out, where we put the hose in place in the Cox, the custom OG spec Cox hose reel. What happens when the force pulls you back, your foot naturally comes off the gas. You have to keep your foot to the floor, foot to the floor.